The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode 90.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Picard called The Impossible Box. And joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Joel Trudom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very good. Jimmy, I have to jump in here and say, someone on Facebook said, you've been listening to a lot of SQPN podcasts. When you hear someone named Dom, someone say hi to them and then think that's wrong. They should say howdy, Dom. So I guess you and I do a lot of podcasts together. So,
I guess so.
Folks, if you can, we'd appreciate it if you would go to Facebook and like Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can also follow us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and we'd love to hear from you, get your comments, your feedback, and for you to share the show via social media in all those places. So we'd love to see you there. All right, so it was a dark and stormy night, as this episode.
Thank you, Edward Bulwer-Lytton.
Exactly. So yes, as the episode begins, we are in yet another flashback. This seems to be the thing for Picard.
I expect it every episode,
but this is only sort of a flashback. It's a dream sequence from Soji, and I have to say, young Soji looks a lot like the actress Grace Park, who played in Battlestar Galactica and Hawaii Five-0.
Yes.
I saw her. I'm like, is that Grace Park? No, that's just a younger version of her, apparently. So we have this.
I liked how she's got the fuzzy blue Domokun doll.
Yeah.
Because they've established that on her bed at the Romulan Borg cube. And they've never made a big deal of it, but it's like now it pays off. This is one of the things that visual storytelling needs, and I've complained about on other podcasts where we're seeing all these characters that we've maybe had limited exposure to, and I can't visually tell them apart, but put the fuzzy blue Domokun doll in a kid's hands and, oh, this must be Soji as a girl.
Right. Yep. Exactly. It very clearly establishes that, which is really nice. And so she's walking down a creepy hallway at night, a child going to her father's office. We see her also, speaking of visual cues, she's wearing the necklace, the paired circles necklace. Her father yells her name as she comes in to his office, and she wakes up. It was a dream, and she's in bed with Narek, and they talk about this. And he's obviously pushing for her to give him some info on this.
Yeah, he's using their pillow talk to interrogate her further.
Yes.
And he keeps putting her in these double bind situations. I mean, the signals this guy throws off are really confusing because it's like he gives her these come close, go away signals.
Yes.
And in reflecting on his strategy, which really comes out better in this episode, he's doing that deliberately to create cognitive tension within her to try to force stuff in her subconscious to the surface.
Without activating her. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they have this thing where he says to her, you're hiding something. And she says, Romulans think everyone is hiding something. And he replies, everyone is hiding something, whether they know it or not, which is a very Romulan thing to say. Then we have on the ship, on Rios' ship La Serena, we have Agnes, Girardi, and Picard. And she gives him her lies about how Maddox died, when in fact we know that she actually killed him. But she throws it out there that the blood pressure, all this other baloney about him dying.
And there's a dialogue flaw here because she says the meds were enough to keep him stable, but his heart couldn't take it. Well, then I guess the meds weren't enough to keep him stable, were they?
Exactly.
Exactly.
And we still don't have closure on why weren't there alarms and stuff. I guess, because she's a medical doctor, she was in charge. But
right.
We have an open question of maybe she removed the records from the system or maybe she didn't and they just are taking her word for what happened.
Right.
But then that's how she'll be outed later because she needs to be outed.
See, that's my thought is I think eventually it'll either be somebody who's going to do a little snooping through the ship's records or the EMH is going to say something or.
Yeah, it'll be the EMH, I think, that reveals it. So they discuss Maddox's revelation that Soji's on the cube, and Picard says he's not looking forward to going there, given his memories of being Locutus, which one of the things that has come out in some of the interviews with the creators is Patrick Stewart said up front that he would only do the show if they trod new ground, if they did new things. And this idea of Picard going back to the cube, I think is part of that. Picard having to deal with this giant, the Borg in the room, you know what I mean? That having to deal with his trauma, which is, I think is good. I like this new way. In the past, he was angry, and this, in was it First Contact and Nemesis. Now he's more afraid, more broken in some ways. By this.
Also, we're seeing the Borg in a new way as victims in a way we haven't before.
Yes, yes. I mean,
as this episode goes on, you see that in Picard, kind of that awakening to what's really happening there at that cube and what the Borg really do.
Right, right. So we'll get that.
We have some nice dialogue in this scene too, because Elrond is present and he's like, "Should I outbutt?"
Yes,
and
yes.
then, "Am I inbutting?"
Right, and then she says yes at one point.
She also says, Agnes establishes something that fixes a minor thing in the canon, because when Picard was assimilated, it was portrayed as a purely macroscopic thing. There were no nanoprobes. They hadn't thought of nanoprobes yet. And then later they used nanoprobes to assimilate people. So how does that square with the way Picard got assimilated? Because you wouldn't think the Borg would have some major technological advance during the course of the series like that. And Agnes establishes that when they assimilated you, they injected you with nanoprobes. So that was part of what was going on. They just didn't talk about it.
Okay. Yep. She refers to the artifact as outcast from the collective and under Romulan control. So we're getting this really firmly establishing that in the dialogue. And she says, maybe they've changed, she says. But Picard replies with that old fire that we've seen, whenever the subjects of the Borg come up, no, they can't change. And of course, we'll see how he changes his mind through the course of this. And then we have that moment where Elnor notices that Agnes is haunted by something she'd like to forget. And is that the murder of Maddox or something else? Maybe, I don't know. And that's where we get the "Am I in-butting?" And she says yes, very, very boldly. Picard, back in his study, his holographic study, does a computer search he Googles the artifact.
And only it's like space Google is not as good as real Google. It takes it so much time to come up with these results.
Well, it's still better than TNG, where he had to use like an android to do the search for him because the computer on the ship wasn't good enough. So
that's right. And I like that they did a little bit of special effects when it shows an image of him as Locutus on screen on the holo screen. They move the camera angle so that it overlays his face. And then he touches his face where the implants were to kind of, are they there or not? There's that, you see the trauma play out visually through Patrick Stewart's acting more so than they talk about it. Trek has a tendency, a very bad tendency at times, to talk about feelings a lot. Whereas you see in this, you see him acted a lot more. And I really like that subtlety that they have here. You see it. It's Patrick Stewart's great acting coming through here. They arrive at the former Romulan neutral zone. They talk about and
which Picard himself smashed up.
Right.
Yep.
And Agnes asks Rios why he likes being out in space where it's cold, empty, and wants to kill you. He offers to listen to her whatever is bothering her. And she kisses him and then offers to be with him in a wifely way.
I think that the implication is pretty clear. They've been doing this already.
Oh, yeah, I guess maybe.
Yeah.
She says she feels hollow, hopeless, lonely, and afraid, which is, as I would say, is the worst reason to be engaging in this sort of relationship, frankly, from a Catholic moral point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she even says, I recognize mistakes as I'm making them.
Yeah, it's her superpower.
She knows that this is a mistake.
She says, I have a superpower. I recognize mistakes as I'm making them. And that implies that not only do we have science fiction in the future, we have superheroes in the future.
Right.
Worst superpower ever.
Exactly.
No. Actually, some of the Legion rejects on tryout day have been much worse, like Arm Fall Off Boy and Plaid Lad.
Yes. We play a game around my dinner table sometimes, like worst superpower ever, come up with the lamest superpowers. But I won't get into that. It's a tangent.
Also, in this scene, we notice, because he's like working out or something, remember when we first met him and he had the huge piece of metal embedded in his shoulder?
Yeah, not long ago.
And the doctor took it out, and then the doctor started to do a dermal regeneration on it, and he waved him off and just had this big bloody wound in his shoulder. Well, now not only is the blood not there, the wound is not there. So
no
he
scar
apparently got dermal regeneration after all. Either that or they just forgot to put a wound there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think
he's got some scars and stuff like that, but nothing right where that wound was.
He was being a tough guy in front of Picard.
Yeah. I like the strong moral message in this scene. You sleep around, and the woman you sleep with will kill you if she's that loose. Because that's clearly what they're going for here. I mean, she was sleeping with Maddox. She killed him. She's sleeping with Rios. Now she's going to kill him.
Yes. Well, I like the fact that she at least recognizes it's a mistake what they're doing. Maybe not in the same way we
does it anyways. So
yeah. I was kind of curious about the whole playing soccer thing that Rios was doing there. Is this a thing that not Cristobal Rios, the actor, maybe he's a soccer player in life. I just thought it was funny they spent so much time on that of precious screen time.
I was trying to figure out if it was a stunt double or it was actually him.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, we go back to the cube where Narek and Creepy Sister are discussing Soji's dreams and why should she be programmed to dream? They mention, why that he's wondering. The sister is completely uninterested in the question.
Yeah, and Drusilla just comes out with it at this point and tells Derek, "You're in love with her, with it, a program, a machine."
Yeah, and he doesn't necessarily deny it, but he
doesn't deny it.
Yeah,
nope.
He does speculate that the reason for the dream is that the cognitive dissonance of the constant evidence of her not really being human and her reality of being an android, that all of that gets processed through dreaming. That's what the dreaming reconciles the two sides of herself. And he sees that as her vulnerability, which it eventually proves to be.
By the way, in this scene, I was noticing so Derek and Drusilla both have these little earpieces. Yes. And I noticed in this scene, they're both wearing them in their right ear, but they haven't said anything about these earpieces. I mean, it's like, I guess they're earbuds, or are they only have them in one ear?
Or are they earrings? Decorative.
Oh, I don't know. I assumed they had a function. They look,
I thought they were more like comm pieces or something like that.
Yeah.
But they really don't say anything about them. So,
well, he's got it while in bed too. So that'd be a weird thing to wear to bed. Although maybe that's a Romulan thing. But I've seen piercings in that place on people like in real life. So, which again, I don't like piercings in general. I'm never good at piercing myself in general. So that just gives me the creeps a little bit.
I'm okay in the earlobe. I mean, I don't have any piercings, but it doesn't bug me to have them in the earlobe. But when you get to the tongue, it bugs me.
Yeah. A big hoop would make you look like a pirate, Jimmy, just to say that. Anyway, we get the titular impossible box in this scene, although the literal version of that, the figurative version, is Soji herself, of course. And the impossible box is a kind of cross between a Chinese puzzle box and a Rubik's Cube that Narek is constantly fiddling with. And he says, his sister says, "Oh, I would have smashed that a long time ago." And he says, "Yes, that's you. You're not very subtle. You must be patient to open it rather than smash it." And he says Soji is the same way. And as he opens it, and it's got a little bit of automation in it, a little figure emerges from it. And so that's a bit of a foreshadowing we got here. So Picard and company, they discuss how they're going to approach the Romulans and the artifact. He dismisses these subterfuge as pointless and says the only way is to be perfectly open. So we don't have them sneaking aboard and that whole thing. They kind of throw that off to the side right away, and they're going to go the hard way.
And Rafi has backslidden.
Yes, she's hiding in her quarters, drinking and smoking snakeweed from before. And she's drunk at this point when she comes out to help them. But
boy, does she come through. I mean, as soon as she's talking to the Starfleet officer to get a pass for Picard to get on the Borg cube, she is like on top of her game. She's not that drunk or high.
Yeah. She's a manipulative addict. Put it that way.
Well, and I'm sure we've all known people that when they need to, they can turn it on.
Yes.
Even when they're drunk.
Yes.
When they need to.
That's the most dangerous kind.
It doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she totally manipulates and using the ask forgiveness rather than permission strategy. It's like, oh, well, we're going to be there in 3 hours. We're what? That's an act of war.
Right.
Well, then you better give us the past, shouldn't you?
So they tell us the Borg Reclamation Project is apparently independent of Romulan control. So there's the Romulan control of the cube, which is harvesting the technology. But the part where they're rehabilitating ex-Borgs, that's independent.
Hugh's in charge of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's under Federation control through a treaty.
No, it's independent. It's independent. It's not even Federation.
Okay. It's multi.
Hugh is a Federation citizen, so he can leave at any time.
Right. So Picard wants to get Federation credentials as an envoy, a diplomatic envoy to the project under this treaty that they have. And so that's what Rafi is doing with her Starfleet friend. She manipulates her into giving them diplomatic credentials, or there'll be an act of war, and basically burns her friendship with her friend.
Yep.
Don't never call me again. I say this as a friend. Meanwhile,
and then we when we cut back to this situation, we have this awkward moment in writing where, remember when Picard first beamed down to Vashti and we see this crowd around him and he's like, Starfleet it's okay. Starfleet understands your concerns. And we didn't see any of the dialogue leading up to that. He's just gesturing. Yep. And we have the same thing here where we cut back to the ship and Rafi is waving her hands and going, back off, everybody. Just give me some peace. And it's like, we didn't see anyone not giving you peace.
Right. Again, sort of telling us, not showing us. So meanwhile, Soji and Narek are talking about how she's always falls asleep after exactly 70 seconds to every call to her mother, which we now know is an AI. And then she tests it, and it happens again, even though she's actively trying to keep herself awake by poking herself.
She stabs herself with like a fork or something like that, and yet
falls
she
asleep.
Still falls asleep. Letter opener or something.
Yep. Rafi and Rios, they have this quiet conversation in her quarters, where she tells him about her son and that's why she's all broken up. And he tells her no one gets all of it right, Raf. Like he's trying to reassure her. A nice little friendship moment that they have there. It's a good point.
One thing I wonder is, they talk about how they've known each other for a long time. I wonder if they're going to show some of that, or if that's just going to be a throwaway line where we're going to see how Chris and Rafi got to know each other initially. Was it, did they serve together in Starfleet? Was it before or after Mars? I wonder if they're going to show some of this at some point, and it's going to be developing towards the later part of the story,
or if not this season, maybe a future, next season.
Yeah. I mean, it could also just be a throwaway. How long have you known? Oh, we've known each other for a long time. Right. Okay, fine. They're old buds.
Yeah.
Done.
I was interested by an insult that Rafi gets in on Picard while she's talking to her friend in Starfleet. She says, like, oh, that guy, Picard. Every part of that guy that isn't ego is rampaging id.
Yep.
And I'm like, really? That's not how I view Picard. So in Freud's system of carving up the human psyche, you have the id, the ego, and the superego. And the superego is like the morality rule dictating part of you. The id is your base, animal, whatever, emotional, motivational desires. And then the ego is the practical part of you that tries to harmonize the rules that that you impose on yourself with the desires that your nature imposes on you. And if anybody had a massive superego, being Mr. Particular morality rule follower, I would have thought it was been Picard.
Yeah.
So it's like, he's not Mr. No superego.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I love the line about how he's so Starfleet, you probably still have him on your recruitment
Posters.
brochures.
Yeah.
Right. So they get to the cube, and Picard is told he has to beam in alone. He's not happy about it. He's not happy about going there by himself and being in the cube. This is by the way, the first time that Picard will be on a Borg cube since the Best of Both Worlds Part 2, since leaving as Locutus. So this is a momentous moment for him.
Was he on the Borg cube in
First Contact?
First Contact?
Nope. He saw the Queen when they were in the Enterprise's engineering.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yep. So this is his first return, and so, but his desire to help Soji.
Catherine Janeway was back and forth on Borg cubes all the time.
They had set up a guest room for her.
Frequent flyer miles on Borg cubes. Yeah.
She had a guest room off the Queen's cell. Yeah. So his desire to help Soji overcomes his fear of being back on the Borg again. So before that he beams over, we have Soji awakes from her involuntary slumber and goes looking in her quarters for this old lunchbox, which has all her memories in it, her pictures. It's a Adventures of Flutter lunchbox. Did you notice that?
Oh, I thought about freeze framing it to see, and I didn't. Oh man, Flutter was awful.
So Flutter it's interesting. So Flutter was from Star Trek Voyager. Neelix has brought this to the Federation, and to presumably a generation of young children throughout the Federation got to have this old, what's Neelix's race? Whatever Neelix's planet is.
Porcupine people.
Yes, the Porcupine.
Yeah.
To get to enjoy the adventures of Flutter that he brought back with him from the Delta Quadrant. So anyway, she goes through all her old photos and uses kind of ingenious. She uses a scanner of all of her old stuff, and everything is no older than 37 months.
Yeah, she's carbon dating everything.
Yes, and so she realizes her entire life basically is no older than 3 years and a month.
Which is what Agnes Girardi told us a few episodes ago, that Daj's identity was apparently manufactured just over 3 years ago.
Right.
Yep. So it's pretty consistent there.
Picard beams over, and there's no one there to greet him in the cube. He starts having very powerful flashbacks, like physical flashbacks. And apparently the Borg subscribe to the same philosophy of architecture as the the Empire in Star Wars. There are no railings anywhere.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
so
let's stumble over this very narrow bridge over a huge chasm.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he's saved from falling by some former Borg who saved him. But he's having these hallucinations where at first he thinks that they're Borg drones, and he's get off of me, and it turns out the Hugh shows up and says they're trying to help you, trying to save you from falling. Picard and Hugh have a warm reunion.
Which was good to see. I was, the way this series was going, I was so afraid it was going to be yet another animosity between the two of them. But no, it was Hugh was truly overjoyed to see him. And
remember, like when Hugh and Picard met, Picard hated Hugh. He despised him, wouldn't even see him, and was going to use him as a living virus to kill all Borg, including Hugh. And then they had that moment where they connected, and he used them as more of a moral virus, shall we say, to spread morality and individuality through the cubes. And yeah, that was a mistake. Well, it got us to where we are here with this artifact, I suppose. Hugh helps Picard process that the cube is now the artifact, that the drones are ex-Borg, that they're victims, that they're liberating from their enslavement, and that he's no longer Locutus. Although at one point, one of the extras, who's an XB, sees Picard walk away. As they're charging through the hallways in an emergency situation, one of the ex-Borg just goes, Locutus? Like, I went to school with that guy. It's kind of funny.
Well, we were on the same cube.
Yeah, we were in the same junction and subsection. Also, despite the enormous danger that Soji is in, that
Picard and Hugh realize.
Yes.
Instead of going immediately to deal with Soji,
they give him a tour.
Hugh takes him on a tour first and shows him all the great skin regeneration work we're doing with the with the ex-Borgs.
Right. But Hugh does tell Picard that he does know something's wrong with Soji, especially given Narak's interest in her. So he's not been completely oblivious to what's going on. Picard says he does say to him after the tour, after all these years, you're showing what the Borg are underneath. They're victims, not monsters. And I really like that line because this is something we need to hear more often in our world, that, you know, even evil people in our own time are not monsters. They're human beings. Right. Even if they're not victims, they're still children of God. They're still, you know, people who we need to see as made in the image and likeness of God, even as sometimes we have to use, you know, force and other means to stop them from the evil that they're doing. But I don't like when we call, you know, oh, that guy's not human, he's a monster.
Right.
I don't like that. And I like that they do this.
Hyperbole, but
yeah, I know.
But on a smaller level, the idea of you disagreeing with me, so you're literally Hitler.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing. I
think hyperbole used often enough can have an effect where sometimes
it has a dehumanizing effect.
Yes, exactly. So I did like this moment and that line there to humanize the Borg, because I know I've always thought, as they're destroying these cubes, as you know, as a viewer, as a fan, I always thought about like all these poor people who are involuntarily assimilated, dying here. Like, they're not bad people. They were victims of the Borg too. So I like that humanization here.
And my buddy died on that Death Star.
Yes. There's a fan film of Star Wars where they follow a stormtrooper left alone on Endor after the Death Star is destroyed. And at one point he says that line. He looks up in the sky at the debris in the air and says, "I had friends on that Death Star," which I thought was a great addition. That fan film.
I have a T-shirt with that.
Yes, that's me too.
Awesome. But you know, it so long the history of the Borg in Star Trek has been basically, once they're assimilated, they are no longer human or whatever race. They are basically meat tools,
right,
for the collective.
They're zombies. They're essentially how we look at zombies. They're not the people they were. They are just animated flesh, and that's sort of how they've always approached them. But this shows them as human.
They do have intellects that have been reprogrammed. So you sever them from the collective. Right. And 7 of 9 was like totally into Borg ideology once she was first severed. Yes. And it took a long time for her to come around. And even Hugh is like, oh, hey, Geordi, we're going to assimilate you. And it took a while for Hugh to come around, even though he was much less aggressive than 7 because he's not Jerry Ryan.
Right. I mean, we even had that Voyager episode where the Borg who awakened inside the collective, and was it Unimatrix or whatever they called it? I forget the name.
Yeah, of it. Unimatrix 01.
Yeah. They had this. We saw Borg who were still people. Anyway, Hugh says at this point, we're still the most hated people in the galaxy, just as helpless and enslaved as before. Only now our queen is a Romulan, which is an interesting perspective. They're free, but not, because they are the property of the Romulans. Hugh is asking Picard to advocate for the Borg to be freed from this. Meanwhile, Raffi and Rios discuss why the Tal Shiar have kept Soji alive instead of killing her like they did Daj, because they must know she's there. She's in the middle of them. And Narek takes Soji off for a Romulan meditation ritual that is normally taboo for non-Romulans, but he tells her, he gets her to go and convinces her by doing this manipulation where he tells her his true name that's only reserved for the one you love. So he tells her, maybe.
Yeah. I liked this aspect of this because earlier on, when they're having pillow talk, she's like, you haven't even told me what your job is. And it's like, guy, you should have made up a job description for her.
Exactly.
And then she notes that Romulans have a name for outsiders, a name for their family, and then their true name that they give only to the one they give their heart to. And he gets up and leaves, and she says, Narek, and he turns around and playfully but creepily says, that's not my name.
Right.
And and I'm thinking, I would not date a woman who behaves like that. Just double bind stuff. I'm not into it all.
Right.
But I like the multiple names thing, because you know who else had that, as we've talked about on Mysterious World, Dom? The Egyptians.
Yep.
Because you had a name that you everybody else would call you, and then you had your true name, which your mom knew. And the reason they kept the other names, the names for outsiders, the reason they used those and kept their true name secret was because you could magically manipulate a person if you knew their true name.
Right.
And so it was like a blind to protect you from magical manipulation, except it wouldn't work with Isis, the goddess of magic, because one of her titles was She Who Knows Everyone's Name.
She knows all
Yeah, she knows all the names. And so Isis could get at you no matter what. But presumably Romulans have, not for magical reasons, but they have multiple names for similar reasons, to, you know, shield them in some way from in certain relational contexts.
They've established that Romulans are, secrecy is number one for Romulans. So
yeah,
it's a matter of secrecy of who they really are.
Yeah,
it's got to be a deep cultural, religious context in it too, somewhere too. You know, there's probably something that's at the root of that.
Yeah, but then once they get into the meditation chamber, and he's going to do this, you know, walk along this labyrinth path, and I'll narrate you through this thing. As he's about to start, he says, "My name is Hrayan,"
right,
which apparently in Romulan means total liar.
Right. Well, because presumably he says it there because no one can hear them inside the chamber, but he knows his sister is watching on the monitors, so it's probably not even really his.
I was going to say, we don't even know if it is even like one of his family names, much less his real name.
Exactly. So he begins to lead her through the meditation, which apparently involves some sort of labyrinth thing. Stay away from labyrinths, folks. And so she finally remembers her dream. She remembers her father in her dream was working on a doll version of her, like a sort of Pinocchio wooden Soji. And then she looks up through a skylight and sees some location detail of like a planet with lots of electrical storms and 2 moons.
Yeah. 2 red moons and constant electrical storms.
Or at least while she was dreaming.
Which is what Derek gets out of her. He's like walking her through this. He gets her to finally see herself as the doll, and he immediately says, "Look up at the skylight. What do you see?" And we haven't even established there is a skylight.
Right.
But he's pulling this out of, I mean, her subconscious would still know what the sky looks like. So even if there literally wasn't a skylight in her dad's lab, she could look up mentally and see what was in the sky.
Right. So that's not a plot hole. It's him manipulating her dream. And then now that he has what he wants from her, he says goodbye and leaves the box, the impossible box, which this time contains a poison to kill her, or an acid or something.
What's a radiation? They said.
So
yeah.
So we have more, even though he's now got what he wants, because Sis now has the data to find the world where she came from.
Yep.
Maybe, who knows? There could be dozens of electrically active atmospheric worlds with 2 red moons.
Right.
But Soji is all broken up about her dream, and she's like, "Why was he working on me?" And to reassure her, Derek kisses her and then says, "Because you're not real. You never were." And so you have more of this creepy double bind from Derek, where he's kissing her to reassure her, and then he's telling her she's not real and never was. And then he walks out, leaving the impossible box. And as it opens up this time, instead of having a little prize inside, this red mist stuff comes out. And in the reverse angle shot, we see Derek is ready to cry.
Right.
I mean, he really has fallen in love with her, and he's ready to cry. But Soji, when the red stuff touches her, it hurts her apparently, and she goes to banging on the door of the meditation station, and which they've retrofitted into this Borg cube apparently, because this is a popular meditation thing.
Yep.
And the guard who's there is like starting to open the door to let her out, and Derek says, "No, the radiation." So apparently the red stuff is radiation, but that shouldn't be, because red visible light radiation is low frequency unless it's infrared and this is super hot.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have a visible manifestation of deadly radiation that looks red. It should either be totally invisible because it's too high in frequency for us to see.
It's Star Trek radiation.
It should have some spillover at the blue part of the spectrum.
It's Star Trek radiation. That's, all Star Trek radiation is visible.
Don't you know that? Don't you know that these androids are like a remote? They've got a remote control, and that's actually infrared.
No, he said to him in a Scottish accent, "Don't open the door; you'll flood the compartment." So she activates though and starts punching her way through the floor to get to the next level down. That's how I usually travel between levels in video games, is punch my way through the floor. So she punches through the floor.
and suddenly her signal is now back online, because apparently the meditation stations are shielded.
Yes.
So Picard and Hugh could not find her. They went to her quarters. They found all the wrecked stuff from her freak out about everything is 37 months old. And Picard thought, I think she's close to figuring out who she is, because of a messy room.
Yeah. Well, the torn
picture of her and her sister that she'd torn in half.
Yeah.
But they couldn't find her. She wasn't on the grid. And so now that she's punched her way out of the meditation station, she is on the grid and they can go find her.
Right. And so with Hugh's help, they escape. They go to the Queen's cell. So every cube apparently has a Queen cell when the Queen is there. Just like in England, the Queen has a room in every castle. I don't know if you knew that, but I'm making that up. I'm just making that up. Sorry.
I think she probably has more than one. But.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, it has a Sicarian spatial transporter. The Sicarians. Did you catch that reference?
Yeah. Yep. All the way back to Voyager Season 1, Episode 9. They have a trajector, which the Voyager was not able to use to get 40,000 light years closer to home. Right. But Soji, out of nowhere, knows that this thing has a range of 40,000 light years. So there's some embedded knowledge there. Maybe she was subconsciously briefed on what she would find in the Borg cube.
Right. She has a lot of knowledge about Romulans and the cube that even surprises her. And some Sicarians got assimilated, and that's how the Borg have this technology post Locutus's time.
And actually maybe all Sicarians, because if my memory serves, they were a small race that was, I don't know, well, if they had this trajectory, they should be spread all over the place, but so you're probably just some of them. Okay.
Although in that episode, remember the trajectory could only be used in proximity to their planet. So the Borg must have overcome that.
Right. There's power issues and issues of how the protons and antiprotons and whatever else.
Yeah, the quartz layer of the planet's crust, blah, blah, blah. But there was, anyway, we've waved at that. So meanwhile, Picard sets a rendezvous with Rios and says, meet us at Nepenthe, which is the title of next week's episode.
Nice. I mean, so Nepenthe is a word for forgetfulness or oblivion. And you may be familiar with it from Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven.
Oh, I remember it from the Star Trek episode, the Star Trek movie where Kirk and Spock were condemned. Oh no, Kirk and McCoy were condemned to the Klingon prison at Rurapente.
Rurapente.
Was that Star Trek 5?
I thought the Pente sounded familiar.
Yeah, but so ne is not, and Pente is related to pensiveness, thoughtfulness.
Yes.
So it's oblivion, not thoughtfulness.
So originally,
and so apparently Riker and Troy got lost and went to oblivion. Yes,
that's what we're going to find out. That's where he's heading. So earlier, before Picard beamed over to the cube, he had this. Elnor said, "I'm your guardian. I'm coming with you. You can't go alone." And Picard says, "No, you have to stay here. You have to stay, stay." And Elnor eventually does, except Rios and Rafi and Agnes are like, we have to go to this place, that's days and weeks away by warp drive, and somehow Picard is going to get there ahead of us. Where's Elnor? And Elnor's missing. Shows up on the cube, killing some Romulans to cover the Hugh and Picard and Soji. And he's
without warning the first batch. I mean, he doesn't give them "please choose to live."
Yes. He just does it, and he's going to stay behind to cover their escape. Well, I don't understand. I mean, they kind of explain it a little bit that it's going to take time for Hugh to shut down the Queen cell and hide the evidence of
and hide the cell.
And hide the cell.
Yeah.
And that means Elnor has to hold off any pursuing guards. I mean, reasons. Please, and then as the last thing is, he said, we hear him say to the off-screen guards, "Please, my friends, choose to live." So that's where we end things.
I like in the dialogue leading up to that, when Picard is about to go through to Nepenthe, he's saying to Elnor, "Come with me," and Elnor is like, "No, well, first thing he says is, I told you to stay on the ship. Yes, I didn't listen." Which is absolute candor there.
That's absolute candor.
And then, okay, so come with us. Well, no, I bound my sword to your cause. Well, then I release you. I refuse to be released.
He's very, very annoying habit of not obeying orders. And then we have this reconciliation where I'm sorry, that I ever left you behind before. And, he appreciates that.
Won't do it again.
And then we get, coming up next week, we're going to, we like, as you said, we're going to, for some reason now Picard is running to Riker and Troy. For some reason, that's where his next destination is. So we'll see what that's about.
So I thought it might be good to predict, because this is the 6th episode. So we got 4 episodes left this season. And obviously we're going to have probably a 2-part super climactic finale. And I mean, that's what standard story structure would suggest. But we have these unanswered plot threads, most of which are likely to get paid off this season. And I thought it would be a good moment to just reflect on what is likely to happen in the next 4 episodes. And so I thought about that, and I came up with the following list. Number 1, I think we're likely to get Rios' story, what happened with him on the ship that alienated him from Starfleet.
Yep.
Also, I think we're likely to find out that the Romulan supernova was artificial. That's not actually established in the J.J. Abrams movie. It is in some spin-off media, including the prequel novel for this. And it makes sense, because there's no way, if the Romulans had known, if the Romulan star was naturally that close to going supernova, they would have known about it for centuries. They would have, as soon as they developed spaceflight, moved off Romulus.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we also need to have Agnes outed as the traitoress she is. We need to have exposure of what the Conclave of 8 is, including the Borg synth connection. Derek needs to betray Drusilla. We may need to have, they may not pay this one off this season, but the whole point of the neuronic cloning stuff is you could reconstruct not just a positronic matrix, but Data's memories from a single neuron. So that's clearly heading for Data is going to get re-embodied at some point, either this season or next. Commodore O needs to get exposed. I
don't know that that's going to happen this season. But go ahead.
Well, these are things that need to happen. I think many of them are likely to happen this season.
Yep.
Also, Rafi needs to get clean again. That may not happen this season.
Yep.
But 7 also needs to come back. And word is she's coming back this season.
A couple other things. We need to find out what's going on with the rogue synths. What made them go rogue? And of course, as you say,
the Conclave of 8.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And we have to get back to what the Romulan, like you say, the Romulan secret is. Those are the 2 big ones for me that I feel like they have to do this season. What's the Zhat Vash thing against what's their secret? I feel like that needs to be answered. What do you think?
And how is Soji the Destroyer?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I kind of catch on is they've made it clear that Picard is written to be a 3-season series.
Right.
And how connected are the 3 seasons going to be? Because I can see them developing Soji up to the point where I kind of disagree with the idea of Data becoming reincarnated, if you will. Instead, that Soji recognizes that she has all Data's memories.
Yeah.
And that she is kind of like the new Data.
Especially given Brent Spiner's.
There won't be. We won't see. Brent Spiner has made it clear he doesn't want.
He doesn't want Data to be alive again.
And so, and I think that would be kind of a cheap way out. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to see Soji and possibly other of her sisters and brothers,
right,
who recognize that they have Data's memories and capabilities.
And they're going to try to rehabilitate the image of synths in Federation society.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if like next season possibly is where they're going to cover more of what happened at the Mars attacks. How did that happen? Who caused it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not really going to, there's a part of me that wonders if they're not even really going to cover that this season. They're going to focus more on this chase for, we need to find the nest of androids and, and maybe the Zhat Vash connection of why are they so opposed to synthetic life forms.
And then the synthetic life form, who controlled the synthetic life forms in the first place? Although, because Rafi thinks it was a combination of Federation and Romulan groups.
And so it's possible Commodore O might not even be outed during this season at all.
That's true.
I mean, the question is going to be, how connected are these seasons going to be? How long of a story are they planning to tell here? Are these going to be self-contained seasons, which means they've got 4 episodes to wrap up all these storylines? Or is this intentionally going to be, we've got this one storyline we're going to cover with the androids, assumed type androids with Soji. Next season we go on to the
and will Wesley Crusher be back?
I think they're not going to wrap up everything, but they need to wrap up some of these things, and I think they'll wrap up many of these things in the next 4 episodes.
Well, there's going to be a lot that's going to be wrapped up, but I think there's going to be a lot of questions too carrying over to the next season.
That's the thing, is I'm curious who's going to go. I'm going to guess Agnes does not rehabilitate. I think she gets exposed, but I think she's done after this season. That's my prediction. And Derek is probably done. He has to, from a dramatic standpoint, he has to pay the price for his betrayal, despite his feelings. So he's going to pay whatever price there is, and he's done.
Even to the point of taking out his sister or something like that.
Right. But other than that, I'm not sure. Elnor isn't done. Elnor's going to come back.
Rafi and Rios will also be back.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think Soji becomes part of the team. I think that's going to be part of the, because what they need to do is give us a reason why Picard and Rafi and Rios and Soji keep flying off together when Picard is, old man who's supposed to be at his vineyard. So they can't just wrap everything up and decide to go on a new adventure together. There has to be something that continues to drive them through the next 2 seasons. So I think that's a good point. All right. We should probably wrap things up here. I'm looking forward to the next
things. Just a couple of things from this episode. I just want to mention real quick. I got a kick out of the fact that Rafi had just generic brand whiskey. She had a bottle that just said whiskey. I liked how they're using this series to kind of explore more of Romulan culture. Yeah, we're learning more about the Romulans because we really don't in TNG for sure.
Yeah,
and just one thing I got a kick out of. There was kind of background noise. I think it was Soji was going into her quarters to scan all her items, and you can hear the background how there are certain sectors closed due to chronometric activity.
Yeah,
chronometric activity is measuring time. Yeah. It's the study of clocks, basically.
Yes, we've got clocks running in this sector. Don't go in there.
Shut it down.
Chronoton activity. Maybe they should have said. That's funny. All right. Okay. So I think that'll wrap things up for us here. We'll take a moment to first thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including this week, Father Chris, Father Carl, Vera J, Diane S, and Martin G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What do you think of the Impossible Box? We'd love to hear what you thought and what your theories are for the rest of the season. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or you can send an email to trek@sqpn.com. And of course, like we said, we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode, Nepenthe. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Now I'm going to be thinking about that line from Star Trek 6. We'll clean their chronometers. Still untrue, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, the Romulans are in a 250-year bad mood.